Hello, guys, and this is a special fucking series. There I am with the cursing ready. There goes the
Already.
monetization. But anyway, why are we here? I'm calling this the Nemesis Project. And what is the Nemesis Project? Well, if you didn't watch the YouTube video on Game Journal, it's going to be a special thing where we just sit down and talk about Resident Evil and why we like it. And we have about 7 episodes, and today's episode is the birth episode, and it's going to have 4 parts. So we're going to have Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and then the infamous Code Veronica. So,
Ooh.
yeah, I am Joe Dubs. With me, I have Zach. I don't know what do you want to be called? Do you just want to be called Zach, or do you have any fancy name you want to be using?
You can just call me Zach. It's fine.
Well, I have Zach with me, and we're both big Resident Evil fans. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I have a little structure here, and I call this a podcast because I'm used to doing podcasts, but it's going to be posted on YouTube, and it's also going to be posted on nerdreview.com, where it's my own little website where we do everything nerdy and video games, wrestling. I consider wrestling nerdy. What about you, Zach?
Uh, yeah, it's definitely a niche product, I would say.
Yeah, so anything nerdy, comic books, video games, wrestling, yada yada yada. Anyway, back to Resident Evil. So I have this split up into like 4 sections on the Google Doc that we're using here. So let's get into the first. Get reason why I had that as get to the house is because you have the live action cutscene, you have the voice acting, but let's go into the origin of the game. And what I mean by origin is the development. I'm not big into the history. I just know that it was branched off of a game called Sweet Home. Is that correct, Zach?
Yeah, that's right. It was intended to be like a sequel to that game, Sweet Home, on NES, which is like a weird. It's based on a Japanese movie that never came out anywhere else,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a JRPG, but a horror themed JRPG. And there's a lot of the same kind of things, like they go through doors and there's like a door opening animation and there's like inventory management and there's different endings and all that kind of stuff. Very similar.
Yeah, I was looking at the Wikipedia of this game because I never played this game. Did it ever come to the States, Sweet Home, or is it just Japan?
No, it stayed in Japan until maybe 5 years ago, when game reproduction kind of stuff started to really take off here. Now you can buy a reproduced copy of it that you can just put in your NES and it'll play it. I
Yeah,
actually have one.
yeah. Sweet Home is 29 years old. 1989. It came out on December 15th. Um, yeah, and it also has like mansions in it, so I could definitely see where they were influenced by this game to make it on its own. Uh, the thing between Resident Evil and how Japan titled their game Resident Evil, they didn't use Resident Evil; they used Biohazard,
Yeah.
uh, which apparently was renamed for North America and Europe markets after Chris Kramer, director of communications at Capcom, pointed out that it would be impossible to trademark the name in the United States in 1992. God, what a year, 1992, the 90s. But I don't. Do you think it would have been terrible to trademark? I mean, obviously he was a man of power of knowing the market, but
Mhm.
I think it would have sold really well. Like to me, I'd be like Biohazard. That sounds like a cool name. Let me get that.
I think his thought behind it was, I think I read this somewhere, that there were too many other things trademarked as with Biohazard, and he thought there would potentially be a fight over that, or there would be confusion or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think there was a band called Biohazard, and there was some PC game in the '90s around that time called Biohazard. There's a bunch of stuff called that back then.
Yeah, and then eventually they changed it to Resident Evil, which I think Resident Evil 7 is when they started using both combined, where it's like Biohazard Resident Evil 7 or something like that. It was like intertwined.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. Anyway, back to Resident Evil 1. I'm gonna butcher all these Japanese names, so I apologize in advance. But the development of the first Resident Evil game began in 1993, where uh, Tokiro Furuwaja, I don't know how to fucking say his name, conceived as the remake of his earlier 1989 what we talked about, Sweet Home, and Shinji Mikami. I think I said that right.
Yeah, Shinji Mikami.
When in the late 1994, marketing executives were setting up to bring the game to the United States. Thank God. Imagine if we never got Resident Evil, we wouldn't be here doing this podcast. And we wouldn't have this great franchise to talk about.
Yeah, like from what I understand, originally it started as like a really small team, and over time, like the game changed, and slowly they kept getting more people onto their team until eventually it became kind of a big project.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it here? It says it pointed out as a DOS game has been recently registered under that name. Yada yada yada. It was later ported to what you played on your YouTube channel, the Sega Saturn, which
Mm-hmm.
I need to get. um, I will say this: PlayStation definitely had more power than the Sega Saturn. I believe Sony came out after Sega Saturn, or probably the same time, if I'm correct.
Um, they were Saturn was at first going to come out later, but at like an E3, I think around '95 or something, they went ahead and jumped the gun on their release date and rushed it out before the PlayStation would come out.
Mm,
Um, so yeah, as to whether or not it's more powerful, one's more powerful than the other. Uh, so the PlayStation was a lot easier to program for compared to the Saturn, which was like super hard because of how it was built.
mm-hmm.
So that's why 3D on it sometimes looks choppy or weird, but there's pretty good examples of decent 3D on there. It's not like you can't find a good 3D game on it.
Yeah, and the music, I will say, was different compared to the Sega Saturn and the PlayStation. And what you told me that during the stream is that the Sega Saturn was the original soundtrack, and then when they had the director's cut, uh, they remixed it, and it was just terrible.
Yeah, the PlayStation, the first PlayStation version has the same soundtrack, the one where it comes in the long box or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, they both have that same track, and then yeah, they decided to do a remix with I can't remember that guy's name. He's got kind of a long name. But it was the guy who was blind and he was called like deaf, and he was like called Japanese Beethoven and all this stuff, and he turned out to be like a huge fraud. Like he can't actually read or write music or something, and he had like a ghostwriter the entire time.
It's like he got. Imagine if they had like a MacBook back then, and he went on like Apple Music or something, and like a Garage Band, and just started like remixing all the old the old music, and be like, "Oh, I remixed it. It's amazing now." And then they're like, "Perfect. Let's put it into the director's cut."
Yeah, it's it's seriously a joke though. I can think of two tracks off the top of my head that you could like compare and be like, oh my god, why did they do that? One's like the mansion basement,
Mm.
um, and the other one I think I don't remember the exact track name, but it's when you fight the spider sub boss in the tunnels.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
everything about Resident Evil with their soundtracks is it's so iconic. No matter what game it is, it's just the mood is so different in each part of the levels, which I find funny that in every Resident Evil there's like four levels. Like you start at like the main level, if it's like a police station or a mansion, and then you have your underground sewer, and then eventually you make it to a laboratory that is conveniently under every game that you play, because
yeah.
Umbrella likes to plant laboratories underground. So, is there any other like history tidbits that I haven't touched on yet that you want to mention?
Sure, yeah. Like they went ahead and decided like we were talking about before. It's like, oh, this will be like a sequel to Sweet Home or a remake, and then very quickly they figured out nobody's gonna know what that is. Like, and they went ahead and started Resident Evil. And at first, it was going to be like a first-person game
Mm-hmm.
with paranormal elements. Now that sounds kind of familiar if you think about Seven,
Yeah. Um,
and that got changed over time to what we have now.
yeah. We'll eventually talk about seven, but like when you look at Resident Evil One and then the evolution of the games, it's like the zombies become less of a thing. It's more about the virus than anything, and the company of Umbrella, which kind of gets lost in translation. People go, well, "Where's my zombies?" That's all I care about, and then they get all pissed off when it comes down to like even Resident Evil 4 when you had the Ouroboros and the village and the cult and everything. Like, what am I playing? But what do you think
Yeah.
about that?
Um. Yeah. They kind of. I guess they figured, or Mikami figured anyway. He felt that it needed to change, so he did that. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of people did get kind of bent out of shape about that. How it changed from zombies to just random mutate monsters and stuff. But I don't know. Yeah, I feel like they definitely have their place. There's like with the Resident Evil 2 just came out. I think zombies are back though.
Yeah, and eventually we're gonna get all the remakes. We don't know what. I mean, we know Resident Evil 3 remake is in the work. It's in development, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
even know how far they're gonna go. They could go all over again. Possibly Resident Evil 1, possibly RE4, 5, 6, and not 7, obviously, because that's new. But it would be interesting to see what they do.
Oh yeah,
Um,
things are definitely looking up.
what was I gonna say? Resident Evil. Man, Resident Evil 1 was. I never. Here's a quick personal story. I know we had that in a different section, but I never played Resident Evil 1 when it first came out. I actually played Resident Evil 1 second from Resident Evil 2. Resident Evil 2 was my first Resident Evil game, uh, which is good thing because I think if I played Resident Evil 1, I would have been like, it's pretty cool. You know, it has zombies and bosses and stuff. But Resident Evil 2 was fucking amazing. And I know, this is not the Resident Evil 2 episode or part, but it just that's a quick side note. Trying to think what else we could talk about origin wise. Is there any other history you got on your mind of this game?
um, that pretty much wraps it up. I mean, you know everything else you get real in depth into, but that's pretty much all the bullet points for it.
Cool. So let's move on to the infamous live action cutscene. Uh, when I first popped this in, when I bought this game in 1999, uh, and keep in mind, I did play games that had FMV, so I knew that there was like actors and stuff in games. But when I first played it, I'm like, is this the game? Am I doing FMV?
Yeah, if you look at the box, it's funny. Like either it doesn't even matter what version you own. When you look at the box anywhere on it, there's no FMV on it anywhere. There's no shots of that opening cutscene.
Hmm.
Then you pop that in and start it, and then it's like, okay,
It
and
rem-
then
it
it
re-
just goes into the game after that.
Yeah. It reminded me of like a sci-fi B movie, like the sci-fi channel.
Mm-hmm.
Like you would pop this on and be like, "Oh, you know, I'll watch this on like a Saturday afternoon, you know, when it's raining or something." And it's on a game. There's actually a little side story about the Jill Valentine actor that they can't find her in real life. Uh, Inez, she's called or something like that. That's where she's credited on IMDb. I forgot what video I watched, but apparently they don't know where this actor is. And
Yeah, there's this dude that's been making videos. Like he made one really good video about it. I can't remember the guy's name or his channel or anything. It got linked to me originally. Um, and he was talking about the guy that played Barry, and he was able to track down some information about some of the other guys, like the guy that played Chris, who died unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
and I think even the guy that played Wesker, they were able to kind of track him down.
Yeah,
But
Wesker was
nobody
the
can
great
find.
part.
Yeah, nobody can find Inez, which I think is a false name. So,
I again, I don't know the video, and I'll link it in the description below. But anyway, like it was so crazy, and just the sound editing in that was so horrible too. Because there's a part where Jill Valentine, just goes into frame, and he goes Joseph, and
yeah,
then and the lips are not with the voice at all. It was just so terrible. Um,
I think they shot it all in like one take. So yeah, there's that aspect of it, and then so it was hot outside. It was real muggy, and nobody wanted to be there, especially Inez. She did not want to be there at all. You could tell looking at her in the footage.
Oh yeah, especially when they're naming off like Barry Burton, Chris Redfield. You could tell they were all sweaty and just like, come on, let's get this over with, so I could drink some water. I bet you they didn't get any lunch. They're just like, here's one take, here's like $100, and get in these costumes.
I think they literally found some of these people just on the street or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not a lie from what I've understood about it.
Yeah, and to kind of give a description, and you'll see the video on YouTube when I post it up, and the video here that we're talking about. Uh, it's a quick, what do you say, like 2 minute video of just them running and be like, get to that house, and then like you see Brad the helicopter like, no, don't go.
Yeah, he sticks his arm out like all melodramatically. I like how he got really into it.
And
At least he hammed it up. Like,
yeah, it was so fucking cheesy, and I loved it so much. Like, I'm a sucker for B movies.
mm-hmm.
I think they're great. If anybody remembers The Room with Tommy Wiseau, like
Yes.
it's that level kind of acting in this, and they have the dogs chasing after them, and they say get to that house. They should have said get to that mansion, because they were going to a mansion, not a house.
Yeah, they always call it house, even in the game. It was like, this house is huge. We could get lost and all this other stuff. It was like, I'm going back to the other house to look for clues. I'm like, fuck. Oh, I wish my house was that big. That's not a fucking house. That's a mansion.
Well, I think Barry Burton is the voice actor. It was the only one like, wow, what a mansion.
Yeah. Um, the other thing about that cutscene though is like it's all in black and white. There's two versions of it actually. There's the black and white version that I have that I played through on the Saturn. It has it. I think the PlayStation version is also black and white, no matter what version of it you're playing.
Hmm.
Um, but there's a color version that's completely uncut. Like it shows more of Joseph getting mauled to death by the dogs and everything.
Yeah. It-
And it's the cinematography for that part is actually kind of cool, despite everything else.
yeah, it's way ahead of its time, I think. And maybe it was the director's cut that was colorized, if I'm correct, right?
No,
Maybe.
it wasn't. I think those are you can only see the color version on the Japanese copies. Like I think the Saturn Japanese version has it, and maybe one of the PlayStation ones does.
Japanese always get the good stuff, while we always get the hand-me-downs here in America.
Yeah,
Now it's kind of the other way around with games. Now it's like we get the good stuff, and then Japan gets the hand-me-downs. It's weird.
yeah, it's totally flipped now.
Hmm. Anything else about the cutscene? I mean, if you never played the game, I recommend. What do you recommend? Do you recommend them playing on the Saturn if they have one, or do you recommend them play the PlayStation to go see the cutscene?
Um, for the cutscene, it doesn't matter much. You could play any version. I recommend playing any version of this game, really, even the director's cut or DualShock with the bad music. It's going to be your first time playing, so you don't even really know what to expect going in anyway.
Hmm.
So any version of it, as long as it's like within reach and doesn't cost a ton of money, go for it.
Cool. Now, from a bad cutscene, we go into bad voice acting.
Oh boy.
So there are many gems, and I will do a montage right now where pretty much you have all the bad voices. So here you go. So for recording sake, that's me saying to cut and do all the montage of all the games, all the voices there. So boom. um, you have some gems like when I forgot the guy's name. I feel like a Resident Evil noob right now, but he gets bitten by the snake, and
Richard.
yeah, Richard, there you go. And he goes, "Oh no, I forgot the serum."
There are terrible demons. Ouch. Like some blood spurts out of him when he says that.
And then the part where again, I'm blanking on the name, but the part where Barry Burton is like, "Do you want to go ahead?" And then when you played it that night, he told Barry to go ahead, and then he got shot.
He got freaking shot. He like turned left. There was a door. You heard a door open, and then you heard a gunshot. It was it. And then somehow he ended up at the room I just came from is where I found him, even though he left me to go to another room.
Mhm.
I don't know.
But you meet another Stars member there, and when you play as Chris,
Oh my god.
you get berated by him. Like, you're a fucking traitor. Like, I know it was you all along. And Chris is like, what? I don't know what you're talking about, buddy. And
He goes to shoot him, and then Chris is like, "Don't!" Like he's, it's like amazing. It's just like that.
yeah, just like how you see the live cut scene, you see it in the voice acting. And I have a what do you call it? I have an article here that talks about the voice acting. They had a little was it like a panel? It was a long time ago, but it had somebody that voiced T-Hawk in the Street Fighter game.
Oh boy, must have been Alpha 3.
Yeah, he's like DC Douglas. He explained, and this is what he said: think about Resident Evil 1. Think of Sergio Jones playing Albert Wesker in that one, and how everyone talks about how his performance was horrible. You know what? He's a good actor, he says. It sounds horrible because they probably had 300 lines on an Excel sheet and you had no idea about the context of the scene, so you just keep repeating the line. So it's like, open that door or don't open that door. Let's just do 3 different takes on that. Open the door, open the door, open the door.
Yeah, that sounds right. They probably didn't really have any direction. It
Mm,
was just, I think the Japanese guys came over here and just kind of somebody who spoke probably okay English probably handled a lot of that.
mm-hmm. And Hideo Kojima, I know with his games, he had a American team pretty much direct the American voice actors because there was an interview with David Hayter, and everybody always asks him this question. You're like, "Oh, how is Hideo Kojima?" And he's like, "You know what? I never met him." He's like, "I met him once at like a party or an award show, but he's like, I never met him while I was doing the game because Konami just sent one of their American people to go do the voice acting and stuff." And I found that interesting. And I think that's where they pretty much learned that they didn't want to be like Resident Evil, where it was just bad voice acting. But again, with the bad voice acting, didn't mean that it was terrible. It was fucking funny, and you really didn't mind it back then. Like I think if it was today, yeah, it would be funny to like me and you because we grew up with that bad acting.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in this modern crowd, if something like that was in a video game, I think they would be pretty mad because you had games like God of War and The Last of Us that had good voice acting. But
Like when that came out, that was at a time when there was very little voice acting in games or
mhm.
any kind of acting, even FMV. And the thing is, that was kind of standard back then. None of it was ever really any good. It was all pretty hammy or bad.
Yeah.
Um, so that was pretty much the norm when it came out. And that's what I'm thinking about right now is when I first played this, and I heard all his voice acting and I saw the cutscene. I was used to that, so I didn't really react like, "Oh my god, this is terrible." I was like 11 or something, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well that's cool." I just kept going. But looking back on it now and how things kept changing and getting better, now it's like it's terrible, but it's funny.
Yeah, I didn't really start cherishing voice acting until Metal Gear. Like
Mm-hmm.
that was the first game I was like, wow, like this is really awesome. I mean, it was over the top, but it was still great compared to like Resident Evil. It was like, don't open that door, or Barry.
Oh, Barry! hell, hell, there's like a big difference between Resident Evil 2 and 1, and that's something like I never really understood was people seem to want to say that all of the old Resident Evil games have bad voice acting in them, but honestly, there was a pretty big jump from 1 to 2,
Mm-hmm.
and
Two got a little
th-
better.
yeah, and then 3 was 3. The person that got to play Jill was actually a TV actress and stuff. She actually had pretty good amount of acting experience at that point.
And I think they had better directing as the thing went on. I think the only thing that was kind of funny in Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was the Carlos and Nikolai. Like, those were just like, it's a little terrible. But
Carlos was pretty hokey.
yeah. But yeah, voice acting was terrible, but good terrible.
It's
Uh,
the good bad.
any final say on voice acting before we move on?
Um, no, other than there's a series of funny videos on YouTube called Resident Hazard, and they're all made by this guy who he used to be on that guy with the glasses website. His name was Phalus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he made these in his just as a side project back when he was on there, and it was all he would do is he would cut and paste all of the voice acting lines in different scenes, and he would change the models and stuff. So any line could go anywhere without, and it wouldn't matter because their mouths didn't move or anything. There was nothing to sync. So he made all kinds of like just audio gags just based off of lines being done out of context or something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So before we move on, and I'll do another cut for the YouTubes, is here's another montage of just bad acting. So there you go. Um,
We should start from the first floor, okay? And Jill, here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Hey, what's going on?
Jill? Is that you, Jill? What happened?
Barry, help me, please. The door won't open. Quick!
Stay away from the door, Jill. I'm gonna kick this door down. Hurry! This way!
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Jill! Don't scare me.
That's what I was going to say. Aren't you supposed to be going over the first floor, Barry?
Yeah, you're right. But just take a look at this. It's Forrest. Oh my God.
It's awful.
I'm going to find out what caused Forrest's death. It looks like he was killed by a crow or something.
Barry!
Jill, what's going on? Any clues?
No, but something's wrong with this house.
Whoa. This hall is dangerous. Maybe it's better to secure our escape route first. There must be a back door somewhere. Let's try to find it first, shall we?
Okay, let's separate again.
Just a moment. I found something.
What is it?
It's a weapon. It's really powerful, especially against living things. Better take it with you.
But how about you, Barry?
I have this.
Thank you. I'll take this then.
Is that you, Jill?
How come you look so scared?
Look at this. What do you think of it?
I've been thinking something is wrong with this house.
Right.
Hey, what is this? There's a page missing.
Yeah, I thought about that too. Perhaps that was the most important part.
Richard, what happened?
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
You're wounded. What kind of demon attacked you?
It was a huge snake, and also poisonous.
Poisonous? Oh no. Richard, hold on.
There is serum. Oh no, I should have brought some with me.
No! Richard!
Jill, be careful.
I heard someone talking.
So you heard it too. I think I'm getting old. It seems that talking to myself is becoming a habit.
Talking to yourself? Barry, something must have happened to you. Am I wrong? You sound strange.
Well, it seems I made you worry. Maybe I have been a nervous wreck since all of these strange things started happening. Well, I think I'll go out and get some fresh air for a change. I told you, don't worry. I'll just go and get some fresh air and be eaten by a monster.
You saved me!
So there you go. Anyway, let's move on to the section of journals. And we're kind of gonna touch on the Resident Evil remake that came out on the GameCube, and then eventually it came out to PS2 and then other systems. And you know, Capcom loves to remaster a lot of games. You'll find that out in Street Fighter and then Resident Evil.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of want to touch on this game, Deadly Silence for the DS. When I first went to the video rental store, I was like, this DS game here is interesting. Another Resident Evil. I didn't hear about this. So I popped it in the DS and I'm like, it's Resident Evil 1. And I was like, I didn't want to play it on handheld. And it felt weird playing it on handheld. What did you think about the game?
Oh, well, when I first heard about it, I kind of didn't really want to get into it for pretty much the reason you just said. I even had a DS at the time, and just like, I don't really think I need to play that again. But then one of my friends got it, if I remember right, and he's like, oh, it's cool, you should check it out. And at the time, I was working at GameStop, and I think I checked out a copy of it that got traded in there or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I played it for a little while, and then after I figured out, oh, this is basically an enhanced kind of port tailored specifically for the DS with all kinds of additions and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I want to get this now. And I played through it. Like, I played it straight, both Joe and Chris, and then I didn't play it again for a while after that.
Was that the one where you could take the stylus and you could do the knife on the second screen?
Yeah, there's like you could do like a classic mode where it doesn't have all the added DS stuff, and then I think they call it rebirth mode, where it does have all that stuff. Like there's different puzzles that involve you using the touchscreen and stuff like that, like brand new puzzles. And there's a part where like you're trying to save Richard, like he actually dies while you're talking to him. And you can give him like CPR, and you're supposed to breathe into the little microphone thing on the DS.
Oh yeah, I remember that. My friend did that. I was like, "What are you doing?"
He's trying to save Richard. But it's funny though, because if you give him too much breath, his chest bursts and like a bunch of blood flies out. It's hilarious. But there's like the knife thing. Yeah, you'll go into a room, there are a bunch of crows will fly at you, or like zombies will come, and you just kind of slash them. It's kind of a fun little mini game that kind of just breaks things up. Like I liked it, and the the character models and stuff actually look a little better on this version.
Mm-hmm. I think
Like
the
the
resolution was a little better because of it was handheld, just like every handheld, like the Nintendo Switch. Like when you put it into dock mode, be like, oh, it looks disgusting on TV. But when you play in handheld mode, it's like, oh, this looks pretty good.
Yeah, it was kind of a double edged sword though, because it's like, oh, the 3D stuff was better, but all the pre rendered backgrounds they did suffer a little bit because of the compression and everything, and being on that little cart chip, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, the only other thing I can think of is uh, I think they added a reload button, and there was like they didn't have the knife in the inventory anymore. It was just like a button you held, and they would produce the knife, kind of like in Resident Evil 4.
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty cool. And they added the quick turn and all that other stuff they added in later. So it was kind of like an updated version of it, really.
Yeah, it's kind of like they were testing things out for like maybe new games, and they implemented like the knife and the quick turnaround. That I believe did that come out in Resident Evil 0?
No, quick turn came in 3 actually.
Oh yeah, that's right.
They had quick turn and the dodge. You could like dodge roll and stuff.
Which Resident Evil 2 remake needs a dodge button.
Oh, it's fine. You can learn to dodge. It's like you'll get good at it. If you play as the fourth survivor or you play Tofu, then you have to get good at it.
Yeah, I need to learn the moves. To kind of touch on the Resident Evil remake when it came out on GameCube, I remember getting that game, and this is gonna be kind of a hard take on it, but
Okay.
I love that they updated the graphics and they added a few new things. I just didn't like that the new things they added confused the shit out of me. Like it still had the backtracking and everything, but there was like new puzzles. Like you had to. Do you remember the statue one where you put the? I forget it was either a knife or a key in the ground, and if you took the key out, like the sword would with the statue would start chasing you and kill you and stuff.
Yeah, it was like you're trying to get the one of the armor keys or something like that, and then if you tried to solve it too early, it was a trap because you
Mhm.
needed something else to replace the piece you're trying to take or whatever. And then like this suit of armor would come with like a shield full of spikes, and it would just crush you.
Yeah, and
You know,
I don't know. I'm not the type of person that when you change a lot of stuff, it's a good thing. I kind of like my old school director's cut PlayStation 1 game, and I always
Mhm.
recommend that, but I do appreciate that they upgraded it and made it look all nice and pretty and stuff. I didn't like the Crimson Heads in Resident Evil 1 remake. It scared the shit out of me when I saw a zombie started chasing me and stuff.
Oh yeah, that was a game changer right there.
Hmm. What would you like about the Resident Evil remake?
Uh, Everything. If I'm being honest, I liked every. It's probably one of my favorite games of all time, really. Um, and I liked how they changed the puzzles and stuff, and like really, like being honest, that game has kind of always been held up as the example of this is how you do a good remake of a game, because it took pretty much everything the old one did and improved on it in some kind of way or made it different without it really feeling like to a lot of people that they changed too much.
Nice. Is there anything you hated about it? Like anything you disliked a little bit?
The only thing I didn't really like about it, and this is just so minor, it's kind of like really nitpicky because it doesn't matter that much, is when you would consecutively beat the game over and over, you would keep unlocking things. And I don't like all of the bonus things in that game because it gets to a point to where it can get kind of annoying. Like you'll unlock the forest zombie that can just he'll chase you and explode and insta kill you. Um, and you can unlock a version of it where he's invisible. And like
Really?
why would you want to? Yes, it's like why would you want to play that? That's at least that's the way I always looked at it. Um,
That's torture.
it is. It's like it's masochism.
Ima- Imagine if there's an invisible hunter, which there probably is, and if you keep on beating the game, they're like, "Oh, here's an invisible hunter. There you go."
I think there was a mode where the enemies would be invisible in that, and that's like I don't want to play that. And I think there was one where it was like a real survival or something like that, where it made it to where the item boxes were not linked anymore. So it would be kind of like Resident Evil Zero. You'd have to run back, get all your shit, and then go back to the other place where you're currently, working on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would always do is when I got to the point where I unlocked the forest zombie or any of that other stuff, I would just delete my file and then just start over because I just did. It makes it to where you have to play it with that stuff. There's no option to say no. I don't want to do that right now.
Oh no, that's terrible.
So you just delete your file and start over. It's not like these games are long or anything. So it never really bothered me that much.
Yeah, the only real reason why I think this game is at least a little bit long sometimes is the backtracking. If they didn't have the backtracking, I think it would be a really short game. So I think they fluffed it up a lot to have backtracking so that you have to go all the way back to get this key and then go back there to fight the boss, and then you have to go through a herd of like zombies or hunters, and it's always challenging because every time when you backtrack, you don't know what's going to happen. And that's what I like about the Resident Evil games, because you're like, oh man, I got to go through that hallway again. Holy shit, why are there two lickers here? What the fuck is going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they always throw something new at you.
Yeah, especially the Resident Evil 2 remake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Speaking of good remakes.
Yep. And to kind of touch up on some other games, there was a rail shooter that came out on the Wii, the original Wii. The Dark Side Chronicles, where it's like a light gun game. It kind of puts you on a rail shooter and you shoot zombies, and it goes through the plot. It's not like Resident Evil 1 on the PS1 and Saturn or the remake. It's kind of weird. I only played it once and I was like, what is this?
Oh. It loosely follows the story, like it kind of does it. And like instead of if you're playing the mansion incident, you're playing as Chris and Jill together, or if you're playing by yourself and you have no friends, you pick one.
Yeah.
And that's basically what it does. It loosely follows the story there, and in Zero, and I think 3. And there it even handles some side things, like in Resident Evil 2, where like you play as the part where after Ada escapes Leon, where it looks like she dies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Shows her how she escapes and gets out of there, and you play as Honk, and then you play as Wesker after he gets killed by the tyrant and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a nice little addition. I think I get confused when Capcom kind of throws these like curveballs at you and be like, "Oh, you want another Resident Evil? Well, guess what? It's a rail shooter. Have fun, new Resident Evil game." And I think that's what I have like a love-hate relationship with Capcom, because they would announce this new game, but you never know what you would get. Like when the recent shooter that came out, I was like, "Oh, what's this Umbrella game that came out?" I forgot the title because I never. Once I found out what it was when it was a competitive shooter, I was like, I don't want a competitive shooter. I want another Resident Evil.
Umbrella Corps.
There you go.
Yeah, I heard about that and I had like no interest at all. I'm like, I don't want to fucking play that. That's not what I want. Like, it's okay to try to do like little side games, but I feel like they have to be things that feel natural. Like that's a natural offshoot. Like when they made Operation Raccoon City, which is a meh game. It at least like you're like, yeah, I can see playing that. That's the Resident Evil game, sure.
Yeah, and then like when they throw these other like Revelations and Survivor and Dead Aim, like I appreciate that because it's within the universe and they have a story with it. But when you have like a competitive shooter, the community does not want that.
No, the fan base does not want that kind of stuff at all. It's mostly single player driven.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then it's like there's always that joke too about like, oh, Resident Evil carts or stuff, or Resident Evil Turbo. It's the same thing happened to Silent Hill. It's like when it was still alive.
Yeah.
People would always be like, oh, what's Konami going to do now? Well, now they just make pachinko machines out of it. So whatever.
Hopefully, Capcom does not make pachinko machines. I can't speak.
Oh, they already have.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but there's already a pachinko machine for Resident Evil. It's actually really funny though because I saw a clip of this. It's weird because it's kind of like you play it, but you see cut scenes of the game going by too. But they're all original. they, they use assets of the remake. But there's this one part I saw it in a video one time where like Chris finds Forrest, and then Forrest still has some intelligence, and he begs Chris to kill him and put him out of his misery in his zombie form. So Chris shoots him with a rocket launcher, and he explodes, and he goes, "Thank you," as he fades into ash. It's amazing. You can probably find it on YouTube.
Forrest, how could this happen? Dear God. Forgive me, Forrest. Umbrella, you're going down! You win!
There's many to choose from many systems, so just look on eBay, look on GameStop, you'll find it. Since we're in the journal section of this part, are there any good documents or like journals that you found in the game that like you like to read, or were you just like it's just words and stuff? And tell me where I could solve the puzzle and the passwords and that.
Oh no, I always read all the files in these games. It started with this one because it was just like to me, you were learning more about what happened because if you don't do that, then you're missing out on a lot of the story.
Mm-hmm. There is there is one, and sorry to cut you off.
That's fine.
There's one that I kind of appreciated. Wait, I think was this the right one? Oh yeah, this is the right one. Where you find the research letter of to Ada, pretty much from John.
Yeah, from John.
Yeah, because I played Resident Evil 2 first, and then I went back to 1. I was like, oh, there actually was a John, so she wasn't lying because Ada, you can never trust Ada.
No.
And
what was really sorry about that, but what was really cool about that file, and it clicked for me from just playing through it recently on the stream, is when he says he tells Ada, because that's who he's writing to in the letter. It's like, you know the passwords to get into the system, and then there's one more password to unlock the level 2 door. You'll know how to figure it out. And it's like that weird painting with the blue light and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you have to decipher it. Now, when you decipher the code, it says mole. So he kind of like hit her one last time. He's like, I know you're a fucking spy, and I never caught that before.
Yeah, until the stream, right? Correct.
Yeah, I just for some reason that just never clicked with me until like then.
Yeah, and what I find funny about the letter is like I want you to expose Umbrella, and the spoiler. I mean, this game's been out for forever. Resident Evil 2.
Yeah.
She's working for Wesker pretty much, and trying to get the G virus from Annette and William, so that Wesker could have it, and I guess either use it or sell it in the market. So
I believe back then the motivation was to sell it.
Mm-hmm. And I think also in the remake was to sell it too. So I think both motivations there. But yeah, that's the one that kind of brought my attention. I always liked reading some of the files because it'd be like, oh, these people are biting, biting other people. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And then you would obviously read the memos so that you know what's going on with a puzzle. So that's another thing. But what is your favorite document that you found in the game?
Oh, That one you said was a pretty good one. But I think my favorite is probably the the four itchy tasty one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The one where the zombie pops out of the closet. It's like kind of implying, oh, that's the guy who wrote this memo. There he is in his own closet. But um, it's iconic because everybody kind of knows that.
Hmm.
And that was also a good iconic scare from the game. It's like, oh, you find the diary and then you read it and he pops out. It's because it's cool though because it was a story where it showed in real time the guy was changing slowly and it was affecting him and it was affecting his writing. It got to that point, so you got to like see that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one scene where the first time I got scared shitless when that happened. But then, like, every time I play, and I'm like, oh, watch this, guys. Like, how you did on your stream. You're like, watch, I'm going to read this, and then boom, pop out of the closet.
Yeah, it's just for me playing this game like I don't know 15 times or something. Like,
Yeah. So, if this is your first time listening to this podcast and playing Resident Evil games, I recommend you reading the files in every Resident Evil game because some of it's funny and some of it actually helps you to proceed in puzzles and the game itself.
that aside, it's just extra lore. It's just stuff that helps make it helps flesh out the story more.
Hmm. And it's always good to see actual like finding out like William Birkin in Resident Evil 2, seeing all his memos and seeing John in Resident Evil 1. It's just that's where the lore comes in and you find out like what every character is talking about. Like, oh, that's what they were referencing from that memo and that person that wrote that memo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um moving on to personal stories. Do you have any personal stories about Resident Evil 1?
Oh, not really. Just because it was, I would just always play a lot of games in my downtime, and it would never be anything real special. So, like, I guess really, if I had to go on a personal story, it'd probably be the first time I played it.
Mm-hmm.
And geez, I think I got it October '97. That's when I got like the director's cut or whatever,
Yeah.
or it was the Dual Shock or that. And I was like hooked immediately into playing that game, and I just wanted to keep playing it until I beat it. And at that point, I think it had actually been a little while since I played a game like that again. I think the last one that really hooked me like that real bad was probably Sonic and Knuckles on Sega Genesis.
Personal story about me. Obviously, like I said, I played Resident Evil 2 first, and then I went back and played Resident Evil 1. I got the director's cut.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember going to, it wasn't like a GameStop or a Funko Land. It was like a Mama Papa shop. And I remember they were saying, I want Resident Evil 1, and then somebody's like, well, which one? Obviously, because they had the Sega Saturn and the DualShock version and the director's cut. And I remember seeing, I guess it was Chris with a shotgun on the
Yeah,
cover with
yeah,
spiders and
that's the original cover. Yeah.
yeah, I remember seeing that. And then the director's cut is just a cutout of Chris with the shotgun, and then just the title and stuff. And then there was another one with the zombie on the cover, and it had Resident Evil director's cut. I got the one with Chris cut out, and then I believe there was a demo. Yeah, it was a demo of Resident Evil 2 that came with the director's cut with the Chris on it. So that's how I got not introduced, but I was like, oh, I played that game already. So
Oh yeah.
yeah, so that's my personal story. The only personal thing I could talk about is pretty much that I thought it was an okay game. I still think Resident Evil 2 is way better than Resident Evil 1. But we'll talk about that at the end where we rank Resident Evil 1. We're gonna be ranking it on our own ranking list for me and Zach. And then after we talk about all the games, we'll have a final ranking of every game.
Ooh, that's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I think it's going to change because I'm going to be replaying a lot of these games and I might appreciate a game that I hated and it might move up. So we'll see on that one.
Yeah, same here.
Let's move on to the next section. I call this a Jill sandwich because it's kind of the meaty portion of the game.
Yeah, okay.
So let cue the oh my god, you were almost a Jill sandwich from Barry Burton. So that would be great to put in there. So I put a couple of questions here. Who do you prefer to play as?
Jill.
Was it because you got the Beretta right away?
No, it's just because she has more item spaces and it just cuts down on running around and stuff like that, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. When I first played this game, I picked Chris because I was like, I'm a man. so I picked Chris. I did the same thing in Resident Evil 2. I was like, I'm gonna be Leon first, and then I ended up liking Claire better because she had the machine gun and grenade launcher. But I played Chris, and I'm like, where's my fucking gun? What is going on here? And then like you see the zombie, and I'm like, I don't have a gun. I don't go back to Barry Burton. I run down the hallway.
That's all you can do.
Yeah, like an idiot. And then I obviously found out to go to Barry Burton, and then he shoots him with his big ass fucking Magnum.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do prefer to play as Jill Valentine because of the extra slots and the grenade launcher, and you have the Beretta with a clip, not a magazine, a clip.
Oh, Japan.
Yeah. Because translation. What is your favorite boss?
Oh, I think Tyrant probably.
Yeah, I think so far we're 2 for 2 on the same thing. I prefer the Tyrant 1 and 2. When you 1st see the Tyrant in the tank, I thought it was really fucking cool. And then the ending where you have to put up the flare for Brad. Seeing Tyrant 2 come out, I was like, oh god, and then shoot it with the rocket launcher, I thought was badass. All the other bosses, the snake I hated. Because I was like, I'm in a small room with this big ass snake.
Yeah, that one's just kind of annoying because it's so cramped, and then like where you're in that attic, and then that beam kind of gets in the way. So it can be really easy sometimes. Like I just played and I downed him in 6 shots from the bazooka with acid rounds.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, he died that easy? Okay. But there's been times I can remember where I've played and he'll do this shit where he'll like kind of wrap around you and you'll get trapped in him because he went around you.
Yeah.
And you can't move. So you just have to pretty much try to shoot him and hope you have enough healing items.
Yeah, and you face it like 2 times. And I'm like, God, go away, snake. I thought the spider was cool. The plant was another kind of like snake thing where you're in this like semi small room because it was a mansion, so like a small room is like a living room in a normal house with this plant in the middle of it just whipping at you.
That's what it looks like, actually. Yeah, it looks like you're just in like some freaking den, and then there's like a giant ass plant in the middle of it.
And it was funny because you were playing on the Saturn and they didn't have an auto aim. So watching you play that scene and missing every shot, I was dying laughing. I know it was pissing you off probably, but
It was.
Because I remember I was like, why is he missing? I was like, I remembered easily just pointing and it would shoot, and then he said there was no auto aim, and I'm like, that sucks.
The old version, the original versions of the game on both systems, they didn't have auto aim, so it's like, remember that if you ever go back and play it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was just no memorable boss battles besides the spider and the tyrant, in my opinion.
Oh, I liked Plant 42 because it was kind of a puzzle. Like that part's optional. You don't have to do that. But if you do, it is a lot easier. And then if you're Jill, depending on how you do stuff, I mean, Barry can just kill him for you. So, I don't know. I thought it was kind of unique, but it's not really my favorite. I give it props, I guess.
Yeah, and the tyrant just looked fucking badass. Just, I remember in high school, no, middle school. Uh, Me and my friend, we made a GeoCities Resident Evil fan club site that
Yeah.
only me and my classmates were visit and all that stuff, and we would draw like all the bosses and stuff. Like I drew Resident Evil Zero Scorpion. He drew the Tyrant and stuff. So we traded like pictures of the drawings and stuff. It was cool. That's why I missed the '90s and the early 2000s a lot. Because
Back when you can make an Angel Fire website or a GeoCities or a live journal.
yeah, there's no Facebooks or Twitters and stuff for people to like downvote your fucking stuff, and you know, but that's another story.
Oh yeah, real quick, I forgot to mention this. We were talking about who we preferred to play as, and you mentioned Chris. Um, that I think I did try to play as Chris at first, and then I think I beat the game as him anyway. But like over time, as I played more of these games, and then I would go back and play this one,
Hmm.
I started to figure out like, man, Chris is like really incompetent or something, because he lost his freaking gun. Like, what happened? Did he just drop it outside?
Pro-
He picks up Jill's. That's what happens. He goes back out in the hallway. He's like, "Where did everybody go?" And her gun's laying there.
hmm.
But I figured out this thing where anytime you play as Chris in any of these games, there's always something wrong with it in some kind of aspect. I call it the Chris curse. And in the first game, it's he has 6 item spaces. He needs to get small keys. He doesn't start with a gun. His loadout isn't as good as Jill's.
Hmm.
And then you play Code Veronica, and it's like he does that cutscene where he's rock climbing up there. He's landed on the Rockford Island, and he's like got a duffel bag full of guns. You know what happens? He fucking drops it. He drops the gun, all the duffel bag full of fucking guns, and all he has is a Glock now.
God damn it, Chris.
Then you play Resident Evil 5, and Resident Evil 5 is a whole other can of worms.
Yeah,
It,
we'll talk about that where he says fuck guns and he starts punching boulders, but
then you have 6. You play as you say Chris has the most boring part in 6, I would argue.
yeah.
I'm just saying, there's a pattern.
And then, I mean, we see him in 7. Did you play the Chris thing in 7?
No, I didn't play the DLC yet.
I think that's what we'll probably do before that episode. That's a long way. That's the end. But anyway, since we're talking about parts here, what was your favorite part of the game? Like, was there a scene? Was there a puzzle? Was there a um, just part of the game where you're like, I fucking love this area?
Oh, I think to me it was always when you would go back to the mansion after you finish the guardhouse,
Mm-hmm.
because then at that point you can explore the rest of it finally, and that's also when you get the Magnum, the Colt Python,
Yeah.
and then you can kind of let loose a little bit with it and just start, blowing hunters away with it in one shot. So that to me, it was always fun to kind of run around and just like clear the halls and stuff, and then see what the rest of the locked doors had behind them that you couldn't open before.
Mm-hmm. Cool. I think mine's gonna be cheesy, I guess, is when you confront Wesker, pretty much. And when you see Wesker pretty much get bitch slapped by the tyrant, and the whole time you think he's dead, and then he again with the voice acting is just terrible, and
Oh,
finally seeing that tyrant for the first time in the tank, I thought was just badass. I was like, oh, it's finally on. That's where I was like, oh, this is game mode right now. Because, I played Resident Evil 2. I played like 3 versions of Birkin. And now I'm going to be facing, their final boss in that game. So that was my favorite part.
yeah.
Let's move on to weapons. What were your favorite weapons in the game?
Oh, The shotgun for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, that was the start of the trend where you could, like, if you would aim up on a zombie, you could blow their head off and instantly kill them.
Yeah, that was awesome.
And then the probably the Colt Python after that, just because it was like so fucking powerful.
Mm-hmm. Mine is the Magnum and the grenade launcher.
Bazooka. They called it bazooka.
Oh yeah, that's right. The translation. God damn it, Japan. But they fixed it in Resident Evil 2. They're like, oh, this is a grenade launcher, not a bazooka.
Yeah, they actually went and found one, like whoever's in charge of that, like to identify a grenade launcher and properly, like, you know, model it instead of like the one that was in the first game. It's funny because when you examine all the weapons except for, like, I think the flamethrower, it gives you like a detailed description. Like, this is a Remington M 1100 shotgun pump action, blah blah blah. But like when you examine the bazooka, it just says it's loaded with explosive rounds. It's like, okay, well, I thought you were going to tell me what kind of gun this was.
Yeah. I have to think Capcom watched Terminator 2 Judgment Day when they named it the grenade launcher, because it looks just like the grenade launcher from T2 in Terminator.
Fuck. Resident Evil 2 has a lot in common with Terminator 2.
Oh yeah, definitely with Mr. X.
Not just that, just like how it is compared to the first one. It's like, well, you like the first Terminator, it's different, but then you watch Terminator 2 and it's like, oh my god, this is like Terminator on steroids. Action's crazy. Resident Evil 2 is the same in a lot of ways.
It's like the holy grail of the franchise, pretty much.
Yeah.
All right, and then the final question here in the Jill sandwich is, what is your best rank? And guess what? Go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say triple S plus.
Triple S plus. I wish there was a triple S plus. That sounds like a Burger King sandwich in some way. There is no rank in Resident Evil 1.
Nope.
Resident Evil 2 is when they start implementing like ranks and, you know, how many deaths you have, how many saves you made, and all that stuff. So yeah, there was no rank. So let's do it this way. How long did you first beat the game? Was it? Because
I don't remember my old time. I'm gonna say it was probably around 7 or 8 hours the first time I played it.
Yeah, and I would have to say the same thing for me, because, you know, playing Resident Evil 2 and then going back to 1, I kind of knew the ropes going in there. But you don't speedrun the game, right? You try to get like a best score in any way? Is that
No, I'm not really a speedrunner. I just kind of play leisurely, but like at the same time, because I know where a lot of stuff is I can still get like a decent time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think when I just finished this one, I think my time ended up being like 5.5 hours.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's a little bit lower than what the average is, I think.
There's people that like do it within like an hour or two, and I'm just like, have fun with the game.
That's fun to them. They're just a different kind of people, man. Like,
it's not a competition, damn it. Play the game.
They make it one. People found a way to make Resident Evil competitive. It's morphed into its own sub community of Resident Evil speedrunners.
Mm-hmm. That's how I found out about the stanky leg walk, where you just tap the button and you go faster when you're in like critical condition, pretty much. Because I actually watched a speedrunner. She's like, oh my god, I'm in danger mode. Don't worry about this. And then she starts tapping the D-pad up, and she's doing like this funky walk, but it's going faster than what she normally is.
Wow.
Yeah, all those hacks. Yeah, and that is the Jill sandwich portion. I named this section "Brad, Get Us Out of Here," pretty much. Brad Vickers being the helicopter pilot at the end of Resident Evil 1. We're gonna rank Resident Evil 1 right now. The reason why I chose 13, 1 through 13, is because there is 13 mainstream games. We're not gonna count like Dark Side Chronicles and Deadly Silence and stuff. Just Resident Evil 1, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, yada yada yada. So
Okay.
I'm gonna start with you first, Zach. So where are you gonna put Resident Evil 1? 1 being that it's the best, and 13 being the least best.
Ooh, well, I want to say right now there'll probably be 5. I'm gonna say 5.
You know, 5. All right, let me.
Yeah.
I'll put 5 right now for now, and then I'll eventually edit that later. um, interesting. I'm gonna put it at 7 for me.
Okay.
So again, this is just it could change by episode 7, and all the parts that we do. It could either go up or it could go down. So keep that in mind.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yep. And yeah, that's pretty much part 1 of our first episode here of the birth episode, because the reason why we called it the birth episode is because this is the birth of pretty much Resident Evil and survival horror games in a way. I mean, they had it back then in the NES and SNES and DOS games, but it didn't really explode until Resident Evil, in my opinion.
That's pretty much true. Yeah.
Yeah, because kind of quick before I sign us off, it's like when I heard that there was like horror games in like SNES and NES and DOS games, I was like, there's nothing really scary about it besides like a spooky picture and something chasing you on the screen and stuff. Other than that, like when you go into 3D modeling like Resident Evil, that scared the shit out of me. Like when the dogs came out of the windows, that was
Mm-hmm.
scary. Like in Resident Evil 3 when the Nemesis just crushes through a wall, fucking
Yes.
scary. But yeah, um I hope you guys like this. This is going to take a really long time to do, but I'll say we'll get this done in like 4 months because we have to cover all these games.
Yeah.
But how do you feel about this, Zach? Are you having fun so far?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I can talk about these games anytime, anywhere, because they're among some of my favorite.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I could talk Resident Evil just how I could talk wrestling and how I could talk Metal Gear. I could talk it forever.
Yeah.
But to catch us, we are on YouTube. This is a Game Journal presented podcast. It's the Nemesis Project. And we also will have an audio format on our nerdreview.com, which will be on Podbean, which is novnetwork.podbean.com, which I'll have an audio version. So if you don't want to watch videos where I have the cuts of all the montage of the bad acting and the gameplays and stuff, if you just want to listen to this, that will be over there. But until next time, I'll do a little Chris here. No, don't go.
They'll be back.
Yeah, we'll be back for part 2 of the Nemesis Project, starring Resident Evil 2. See you guys later.
See ya.